Good morning, everyone. I'm Amy French. I'm the head of Level 39, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this morning's virtual event for our panel, Inclusivity, Accessibility and Recovery. What will 2021 hold for the UK tech ecosystem? Joining me today are three panelists who are at the heart of the UK tech ecosystem. A special welcome to Russ, founder of Tech London Advocates and Global Tech Advocates, Naomi Timperley, co-founder of Tech North Advocates, and Julian David, CEO of Tech UK. Today's panel is all about what 2021 has in store for the UK tech ecosystem and how it's likely to respond to the major challenges that 2020 has presented for everyone. Firstly, it's not all doom and gloom. The latest figures show that the UK had a record year for tech investment, with London alone bringing in $10.5 billion in VC funding in 2020, retaining its crown as the tech star of Europe. As the pandemic kept us apart, it was technology companies who filled the gaps. Whether it was the rise of e-commerce, the success of biotech, the boom of communication apps, fintech and challenger banks supporting the government loan schemes, it was often tech companies and innovators that stepped in to make our lives a little more normal. Yet, the year has also brought to light some stark contrasts in the UK. Whilst billions flowed into technology companies, we discovered that thousands of school children lack basic equipment and internet connectivity to learn remotely. 2020 also exposed other issues, which for far too long have been pushed aside. Climate change and carbon emissions rose to the top of the agenda. The realities of representation, diversity, and inclusion all came right to the fore, and not just in the tech sector, but throughout business and society. Looking back at the year, a key lesson we learned was that we cannot succeed as a country where we do not do so together. And for the UK tech ecosystem to be successful, that is its big challenge, but an even bigger opportunity. So with this in mind, I very much welcome our guests to this virtual stage. So welcome, Russ, Naomi, and Julian. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Hello.
So may I ask each of you to briefly introduce yourselves to our audience? Russ, would you like to start us off?
Sure. So I'm Russ Shaw. I'm the founder of Tech London Advocates and Global Tech Advocates. These are communities of tech leaders, experts, investors, all coming together to promote their local ecosystems and to identify and speak about the issues and challenges that we face. So I run the London group, and we now have 18 groups in our global network, including the brilliant Tech North Advocates led by Naomi.
Fantastic. Thank you, Russ. And Naomi?
A nice segue there. I am a Tech North Advocates co-founder with Volker Hirsch. My day job is I am a growth and innovation consultant, generally working with tech, digital and creative businesses, and very much part of the ecosystem in Greater Manchester, but also with wings in Yorkshire and other parts of the north.
Wonderful. Thank you, Naomi. And Julian.
Okay, keeping the continuity theme. We were the first sponsor, or if not the first, very close to the first, of Tech London Advocates, Russ, in the early days. And it's been fantastic to see that we're partners now and really supporters of what you do. Tech UK is the trade association for digital tech companies. 830 member companies employ about 750,000 people up and down the UK. And it's everything from very, very small companies through to the national and international champions and well-known companies, you know, everything from chips to clicks.
Fantastic. Thank you. And thanks to everyone, all of our audience, for joining us today. Before we get started, if any of the audience would like to get involved in the conversation on Twitter, please do so using the hashtag Level39. As a quick reminder of the format of the session this morning, this will be a 45-minute panel discussion opening up to Q&A for the last 15 minutes. Throughout the session, please do feel free to share your questions through the Q&A box to the right-hand side, and we'll come to all of those at the end. There is also opportunity for virtual networking following that Q&A using this kind of remote platform. So I very much encourage you to all stay for that as well. Right, so to kick off, so I'd like to start by talking about the success of UK tech over the past 12 months. Julian, I mentioned a moment ago about the record levels of tech investment in 2020, despite the uncertainty of the pandemic. The London tech sector's reported very promising investment figures in the last few weeks as well. Is this a trend you're seeing across the UK?
Well, it's not across. I think that's the point, really, Amy, is that overall tech has prospered and developed well. A lot of which, of course, has been dealing with the consequences of the pandemic and that switch to the new normal, the online world. But it's been patchy, and you see that for some particular companies, people involved in infrastructure or support for remote working, new ways of doing business, new innovations such as the platform we're sitting on today. These are companies and the areas that have grown and have done well. Health tech's another one where that's gone. Ed tech is another one where those kind of things are really prospering and getting. But if you are in the business of servicing some of the industries that have really been affected by the pandemic, it's a different story. And if you are a small or a mid-sized company, project-based activity, or bringing something new, then sometimes you've been crowded out by the necessity of just doing what's already there. So we've seen a lot of our smaller member companies see trade diminish in that context. And it's the same with funding, where it's more a geographic problem. London, thanks to people like Russ and others, and some parts of the north, some of the cities, Manchester, Naomi, I'm sure can talk about that, some other places like that, and the perennials, Oxford and Cambridge, do seem to be bearing up. But we are seeing that there is still a problem with access to funding, access to skills, access to investments in other areas of the country, and that's something that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely. And talking about the north of England, Naomi, what have you seen over the last year? How have kind of the tech hubs in the north and companies responded to the pandemic?
Do you know what's been really wonderful has been the fact that we've got amazing people like Stuart Clark in Leeds, who ran 2 Leeds Digital Festivals last year rather than his normal in-person one. And just seeing the North coming together, I think certainly, yes, we don't get as many investments as London, but it does happen. But I would certainly say that camaraderie is definitely there. I think perhaps some of the silos that were there before, when regards to sort of ecosystems talking to each other, that's sort of gone a little bit. And I think it's been, for me, really fantastic just to see people pull together and support each other. And to be fair, that's why I got involved with Tech North Advocates. Volker and I were very much doing this anyway, and it's really about supporting each other.
That's really good to hear. And coming to you, Russ, do you think that the past year will impact the location where tech companies will seek to grow? And do you think, therefore, the move to home working's created the new hubs in the UK?
Yeah, I think we are going to see some changes. I mean, building on Naomi's point, I think one of the things that really accelerated last year is I think our tech hubs were interconnecting much more with each other. Just this week, for example, Naomi introduced some Tech North advocates to me to bring into the London group. I did the same with her. We're really trying to build these cross tech hub relationships. And I think that's actually a microcosm of what's starting to happen across the country. And then when you layer on the pandemic on top of that, with people, working remotely much more extensively, I think companies are starting to think more differently about, where do they base themselves, but also where do they hire the next group of employees? I mean, if you look at, Starling Bank, one of our fintech unicorns doing wonderful things, they started in London, but now they're building up a significant base on the South Coast. So yep, they can have that cross-city collaboration. That's going to be a big part of how they operate. And I think we're going to see that happen with more and more startups and scale-ups across the UK. London, I like to say, is the global city, not just for the UK, but for the world. It's a great asset that we have. But in places, it is very expensive to operate in London. So if there are other places in the UK where there is great tech talent, where there are great tech resources, I look at Manchester. I think Manchester has done a phenomenal job in the past few years, really emerging as one of our strongest tech hubs in the UK. And, the cost of living in Manchester, it's not cheap, but it's not quite at the level of where London is. So if you're a London business looking to expand, why don't you look at Manchester? And, we've got great connections between the two cities. So I think more companies are going to look at that as a way forward.
And on that point, Naomi and I, we spoke about these kind of new tech hubs that are emerging now. Would you like to add a bit more to that?
Yeah, Wired did an article a couple of weeks ago just about, the new tech hubs. And I would agree with everything that Russ said, but it was quite interesting. They, talked about Bristol, which has an amazing hub anyway. Newbury in Berkshire, Leeds, which is a major tech player with NHS in England. You also, there's lots of digital health around Leeds, and lots of other really amazing organisations like BJSS, and they also talked about Basingstoke. And the lovely thing for me, and that's only because I'm doing lots of work at Media City at the moment, is in Manchester, they highlighted not the city centre, but actually Media City. And they called it the jewel in Manchester's crown because it's been named the first connected neighbourhood in Europe and only second in the world alongside the Hudson Yards development in New York. And there are 250 media and digital businesses in Manchester. And I very much think that when we go back to any kind of normality, people won't just be going into the city centres. Myself and Pete from growth agency Alt Theory, we have a space in a beautiful part of Yorkshire called Saltaire. We don't feel the need to have it in a city centre, and I've certainly seen developers even in my sort of hometown of Sale, which is in the burbs of Manchester. They are reinvigorating office buildings to allow for co-working spaces outside of the city centres.
That's really interesting. And going back to the cross collaboration point on hubs. Something I'll post to all of you, but feel free to jump in, is, we've seen Oxford and AstraZeneca as a great example of how a university and an innovative business have kind of worked together to unlock true innovation. Is that a path forwards for the sector? And do you think our regional tech hubs are doing enough to leverage university expertise? Go on, Naomi.
Sorry, I am so passionate about universities. I would agree that they are. I know certainly Leeds, University of Leeds, loads of great spin outs there. I am heavily involved with the University of Salford Business School. I'm actually chair of their industry advisory board. And if I could say one thing to everybody in this room, in this virtual room, is engage with your local university, because that's a pipeline of talent, it's a pipeline of innovation, but also they can support your businesses as they grow. And I really think that universities are sometimes can be scary places to some people. It's just about talking to the right people and finding those people. Julian, you've got your hand up.
Yeah.
Go for it.
So, I would echo what Naomi's saying about the hubs, the clusters, the growing. I think finally, we're seeing some of the policy people starting to recognise the importance of bringing more clusters in. So Russ and I have participated for some time in some of the government forums, and it's really good to see them having the national clusters represented there through David Dunn, who's based out of Sunderland Science City or Software City. But I've got to tell you that there's a lot needs to be done. We did a series of digital dialogues around the UK throughout last year, trying to actually say, okay, so what's happening in the digital decade? And of course, then the pandemic arrived. So what's happening with that? And what does Build Back Better entail? What do we have to do? And what is it like for you? Because
we lost Julian.
I think we've lost Julian for a moment.
He's turned into a virtual robot. He's not turned into a cat yet, though.
Oh, no.
Shall I jump in here while...
Go on, Russ. Thank you.
Agree with what he's saying. And I do think I've seen, particularly in the past few years, this rapid acceleration between tech and universities and kind of this whole theme around tech transfer. Mm-hmm. And I think if we can keep accelerating that, that's going to be a great thing for our tech hubs and ecosystems. I mean, you know, Naomi has just spoken a lot about what she's seeing in Manchester. It's interesting. I've almost seen two different models here in London. You've got organizations like Here East in Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park, which, you know, is a very large innovation hub in itself, bringing in Loughborough University and developing a whole series on entrepreneurship there. And then closer to where I live in Shepherd's Bush, just up the road is White City. So you've got Imperial College in White City doing a lot of great work there with their innovation lab, and now in collaboration with Scale Space, which is this massive venue just about to open up to support scale up. So almost kind of the reverse process happening. But I do think as we look at cities and regions across the UK, I think for the emerging tech hubs, this is a key to success. I look at Belfast. You know, Belfast has two really good universities. It's got a lot of depth in the cyberspace, and they've leveraged the university infrastructure there. Look at Cardiff. We're hoping to launch Tech Wales Advocates in the spring with Tramshed based in Cardiff. And I think if we can leverage the university there, that is part of the equation that's going to really turn the UK into a tech nation. We have great universities in the UK, probably when you look at the rankings, second only to the US. So this is part of the additional secret sauce that the UK can bring to the table. And if you look at the US, if you look at China, very much anchored in many of their cities where tech is vibrant and alive, you've got great university collaboration. So as long as we keep building on that, and Amy, to your point, I think we need to do more. That, for me, will underpin our strength as a tech nation.
Can I just add something really quickly to that? I also think that the universities have a responsibility as well. It's great to hear, Russ, that you've got universities sort of coming out of their houses and going to other places. And I think that's a brilliant idea. I know that the University of Salford do a lot actually in Media City. And, you know, there are obviously three other universities in Manchester. And, I know Leeds is very similar, but the universities have a responsibility to also engage with the local business community. And I think that's where lies the problem sometimes.
Yes, I think you're right. I think we need to look at cities that are doing a good job of that. Yeah. I actually think a lot's going on in Bristol, for example. Yeah. We touched on that earlier.
They're set square, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. You've got the Bristol's Robotic Laboratory. You've got UE in Bristol. You know, there seems to be a lot of collaboration. Now, what we need to do more of is how do we get them out of Bristol and engaging with the rest of the country, because it's becoming a world-leading hub for robotics, and I think we can all benefit from that.
I think this is actually a really nice point to move on to kind of the next generation and the impact of the pandemic on the next generation. So, going to digital skills, we're hearing a lot about the need to equip people with digital skills. Going back to, are we doing enough across the country to make this a reality? Naomi, Russ, who would like to take that?
I'm going to start.
All right, you go first.
All right, Naomi, I'm going to beat you on this one because we are not doing enough to equip the nation on digital skills. It's, as those who know me know, it's probably one of my biggest frustrations. It's also the biggest opportunity sitting in front of the UK. We're seeing so many people, so many really good people being displaced in traditional industries, and the pandemic only accelerated that. Yet, according to the Tech Nation report last autumn, there is a 36% increase in tech vacancies across the UK. So you look at the demand on one side, you look at the supply on the other, and that crossover point is how do we develop enough of our own homegrown talent with the right set of digital skills? And this is not just about creating more data scientists and cybersecurity specialists and high-end coders, although that would be a great thing. It's about looking at the transferable skills that people can bring to the table. So if you're working in a retail establishment and you're a project manager, well, great. You know, let's try and enhance your skill set with some digital skills capabilities, but there are loads of startups and scale-ups hungry for really great project management talent. So I think we need to do more in that regard. Our universities, you know, we touched on that briefly. I think our universities need to step up here. I get so frustrated with the number of graduates coming out of university. And I actually spoke at an Edinburgh University finance conference a couple of weeks ago. You know, students are not coming out unless you do computer science. You don't really touch digital skills at all. And that's a real source of frustration. Naomi, go.
Okay, I've got a couple of comments on this. So I'll go back to the university thing now, and I can only speak for the University of Salford and the business school, is they have really high employability rates for the students leaving because they make them career ready and they give them the skills and the tools. And I completely agree with everything you say, Russ, especially around the transferable skills. I think that's something that needs to be looked at more. Also, talking about sort of digital skills for younger people, I had the great pleasure of working on a project called Go Digital with an amazing organisation called Digital Inc. In 2019, 2020. And alongside a few other organisations, we worked with 50 schools across Greater Manchester, year 7, year 8. I did the assemblies at every single one of them, and I loved every minute of it. And we had a programme where we would, one day, which was robotics, but also websites, team building, also doing video. So it wasn't just about it was having all those different skills. And it was incredible. Also, I think another thing is schools are so focused on qualification, getting GCSE results, actually having people come in, because I'm also an enterprise advisor for a local school, and bringing entrepreneurship into the curriculum is dead easy. I've been able to do it with a school that I worked with, and it's just being able to give teachers the confidence to be able to do that. But also as well, looking at, traditional, you don't have a traditional career path anymore. You know, if you talk to most people, especially of the age of Russ and I, we're like 25, we have had multiple careers. And I think moving forwards, that's going to, if you speak to people about careers, they are completely oblivious that they think, oh yeah, you're just going to have one job. It's not like that anymore. People have multiple jobs, multiple careers. So I think, yes, it's great if we can get more people doing computer science, but actually it's those other skills as well, because we also need project managers, can get teams working. We need people to come up with ideas. We need people who have creativity as well. And that's a really key thing.
And you used a really good word, Naomi, employability.
Yeah.
And I think we need to think about that when we talk about digital skills. And you talked a lot about the importance of schools in this equation. We need to start with the career advisors who are talking to 14, 15, and 16-year-olds today, saying, look, as you think about what you might want to do in the future, these are the types of skills that you need to have. And yeah, try coding, try programming, but don't give it up on your art and design. No. Why? We're desperate for UX and UI, great UI people. And if we don't have people who have great art skills and design skills, we're not going to create the great UX and UI designers of the future. So there's a whole piece here that we need to rethink. And the other point that you made, bringing entrepreneurship into the classroom, there are already so many wonderful organizations that do that. I'm a trustee for Founders for Schools. And, every day, every week, now virtually, founders are going into schools talking about the businesses that they've set up and they've created across the country. And I was speaking
And
to
that's
some
free.
people.
It's free.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And these organizations are hungry to do that. And these organizations can bring in great leaders to inspire that next generation. And, it's those faces, and particularly diverse faces. We want to see more women who've set up businesses. We want to see more people from the BAME community. I'd love to see more people with disabilities, talk to students in the classroom to say, look, I have these challenges, but I did set up my own business. I was able to produce something successfully. You can do it too. It's those role models that we need to get into the classroom.
And can we talk for a moment about the digital divide that has obviously come up a lot since the pandemic, especially? What do we need to do to solve these issues about, lack of laptops and equipment? Is there enough at a local level, or should it be more centralized?
Do you want to go first?
Naomi, do you want to jump in?
Okay. So I know certainly in the north there's been lots of different initiatives to make sure that people have access, because quite frankly, and even this isn't just for young people at school, this is also for adults as well. So,
Yes.
Giving access to people, laptops, and getting refurbished laptops, it needs to be done. I think there's more, certainly people can't do everything on their phone. I've got a program that I've just developed in 4 Group at the Landing, which is for female freelancers and founders. We have 114 women on the program, and there are a few people that are doing everything on a phone. And it's not as easy. It's not as, they can't do everything that everybody else has. So, we are doing everything that we can to get them laptops so that they can have the same experience. And it is really, really sad because it's not just about the hardware. Some people don't have connectivity. They don't have the internet. So, it goes deeper than that. And it just, this has highlighted massively that there is still a big digital divide in this country, which makes me desperately sad.
And it's going to get bigger because the pandemic exposed those gaps. And building on your point, Naomi, about connectivity, I'm missing Julian. We've got connectivity issues. We need more super fast fiber.
You have to move to Media City, won't you?
Well, let's replicate that across the country. We need more 5G. I think we took a step back with the country's decision about Huawei in the 5G network. It's going to take us probably a couple of years longer to get more of the nation onto 5G. But as we saw in the pandemic, we need the high-speed networks and to have them reach into those rural communities and those disadvantaged communities, and to how do you make it cost effective for people to do it. I feel for so many parents who are homeschooling their kids at the moment. And, I've talked to a number of teachers who've said, look, the more well-off families and households are able to do this. Those that aren't, that might have 4 or 5 kids in their family with one laptop. Well, what do you do? Exactly. Welcome back, Julian. You were reading our minds because we were talking about issues around connectivity. What we can do to get over this digital divide. So,
and Julian, you had some points about the university. Can we go back to that, Amy? Because he had something to say, didn't you?
Absolutely.
Well, don't let me drag the thing into. I was just going to talk, Naomi, and Amy, about the digital dialogues we ran at UK last year, and we did 7 of them in the devolved nations and 4 specific regions in the Midlands and north of England. But we also talked to people in other regions in England, and essentially the thing I was going to talk about was. How do you measure yourself? How do you actually get everybody together? Collaboration and coordination was the biggest theme that came through. And so we came up with this idea of local digital capital, which takes 8 points that came out of the dialogue that are important. One of which, Russ, is connectivity, but only one. Others of which are funding. A lot of which is digital skills, provision of digital skills. A lot of it is about SME encouragement. A lot of it is about connections to universities, to research and development. And in particular, how does that fit in each region? I love your example of Media City, Naomi, because that was really created. I think that what's happened in the UK is we haven't done enough of coming up with an idea and following it through. I mean, Russ, how long has it taken you to get the London Tech Advocates and Global Advocates to get that flywheel approach? You have to have a consistent message, vision. You have to keep at it, and you have to coordinate everybody. And something that came through loud and clear was the patchy nature of devolution. And even within Scotland, where you'd think, okay, maybe they could get this right with the devolved government, the local hubs and the local authorities and the local business groups were saying, we don't have enough of coordination locally. Too much comes from Hollywood. Too much is a sort of cookie cutter thing. And not enough is about putting us all together around a theme, keeping at it, driving these things so they work for the region. Naomi.
Sorry, can I just add into that, Amy? This is also responsibility of the local enterprise partnerships.
Sure.
So,
absolutely.
we have one in Greater Manchester, but, I've just read the recent, because I was on the GMCA Innovation Board, and it's sort of been, I don't know what's happened to it, quite frankly. And they seem to be very city-centric. Greater Manchester has 10 boroughs.
Yeah.
And 10 boroughs of goodness and gorgeous people and tech and loads of creativity and innovation. And actually, we all have a seat at the table. And so even in just in Manchester, and I'm saying Greater Manchester, there are 10 boroughs and they need to be talking to each other as well. And they need just as much attention as the city centre.
Yeah, and that's such an important point. And the LEPs, I mean, controversially, it doesn't work. It's too fragmented. Some of them are very good at some things. Some of them are quite good at a lot of things. Some of them are terrible at some things. Yeah. And the boundaries don't fit with anything else. Yeah. And if you try and do something, I mean, Greater Manchester at least has a mayor now, so there's some sort of degree of coordination. Although a lot of our members say, well, it still seems like 10 different boroughs with just the mayor at the head of the table sometimes. But when meetings happen, we tried to do a smart city thing in Manchester some time ago. 54 people came to discuss a smart city, and I remember also discussing, we've got a group. So this idea that the government's going to put back together the regional health authorities. They're not going to call them that, of course. They're going to call them integrated care and whatever. But that's what it is, and we need the same sort of thing. So collaboration, coordination, and then having something you can measure, so you actually know, is our connectivity really good, but our access to funds is terrible? Is our connectivity really good, but we don't connect on R&D? And being able to measure that and then talk to each other at a regional and a national level about that. That's what we're going to spend this year looking at. But it's also making all of you involved.
Yeah. Oh, definitely, Julian. I've already connected with you on LinkedIn. Yep. Make sure you accept me. But can I just say, just with that, do you know what, Amy? We should have had this for 2 hours because I'm having a great time. But what I will say is that this is also, in Russ, you touched on it before, it's making sure that we have voices from everywhere. Yeah. And I'm talking about ethnicity, diverse, gender, socio-economic. Yes. That's a big thing that gets completely missed. Neurodiversity, everybody needs to have a voice. And the problem is with, and I'm just being very generic now, with a lot of the LEPs, they are usually the people with the most power, and quite frankly, they have
least capability.
Least capability, and actually, I have a big thing about conflict of interest as well. Yeah, because you're talking about money here.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and the fragmentation of money. By the way, there's plenty of money.
Yeah,
we're not a poor nation. We've demonstrated that. But we don't spend it well, and we have too many fragmented approaches to it, and we don't measure it against some big challenges and call it what you like, moonshots or whatever. So look, we're going to be doing this. So I really welcome you all to join that. And your point about demographics, there are large swathes of our society who never met anybody who works in tech. They don't know what you're talking about. So we welcomed an organisation into the TechUK family in October last year, which does accreditation in universities for courses, and they work with the smaller universities, and they work with degree apprentices. And what we plan to do with that is really build on what they already have, which is they have 47% female participation in their courses. Now go look at the generality of who does computer science and associated digital courses, and they have 34% BAME. Now, there isn't enough B in the BAME, and Russ and I are talking to some people trying to fix that recently. But you look at even young white boys, it's the middle class ones, loads of them.
Not the working class ones.
Look at the ones on the estates, in the small towns, in the various parts of the country, and they're not in this industry, and they don't know how to get in. They don't even know what it is. So we need to do a better job of that.
Yeah, this is so interesting. I think we could talk about it for quite a long time. So maybe there should be another one to follow this on. But just being aware of time, I would want to talk quickly about Brexit and specifically the impact of this idea of levelling up, which for the last 12 months has been kind of the repeated phrase used by business and government. So, Russ, coming to you,
Yes.
what does levelling up really mean to you, and what needs to happen for us to get there?
Well, before we get on to that, can I just make a point about Brexit? Because we do talk about this and banter around about this, but I think it's also important to understand we're not done with Brexit. Not only do we have the ramifications of that, but there's still more work to be done. And one of the things that we're focused on, and Julian, we were on a call last week with the digital minister about the data adequacy agreement that still needs to be sorted out. I'm particularly worried about this, not because the UK isn't interested in doing this and trying to sort this all out. We represent 3% of the world's GDP, but the UK represents 12% of the world's cross-border data flows.
Yeah.
Who's number one? China, by a lot. Number two is the US, closely followed by the UK, number three. Of that 12%, nearly three quarters of it is with the EU. So if we don't get a data adequacy agreement, what that means is, we've said as the UK, we can send our personal data to the EU, but the EU has said you cannot have personal data from the EU come into the UK unless there's a data adequacy agreement. And if there's not a data adequacy agreement, there's a whole series of measures that companies and businesses will need to undertake. This wonderful phrase called standard contractual clauses that they'll have to implement in order to ensure that that flow of data can happen. And, in the technology sector, you've got fintech businesses, you've got cloud computing businesses, you've got e-commerce businesses. They are all going to be potentially impacted by this. And the EU does want to do this, but I can also see some potential landmines sitting in Brussels where an MEP might say, we don't like the surveillance powers of the UK. Why should we do this data adequacy agreement? Last year, the European Court of Justice rejected the privacy shield between the EU and the US. And so there are concerns being raised in Brussels. Well, would the UK be a backdoor for data, for personal data from the EU to the US? So you can see some of the discussions underway. And I'm thinking we've got 4 months to sort this out here. Every intention, every effort is being made to do this, but this is a significant risk to the whole country. So when we talk about leveling up, this is going to affect everybody if we don't get that sorted.
Yeah, and those stats, Russ, from the study we did straight after Brexit at Tech UK, and I remember talking to the ministers there, Naomi, and saying, what are you doing about data and data adequacy? And every single one of them, and I'll give you the names I spoke to. One was B. Johnson, the other was L. Fox, and the other was D. Davis, one of whom is still in a position of great influence. They didn't know what I was talking about. They had no idea. They didn't understand this at all. And it's taken 2 years more to get them to the point where it became government policy. It is government policy. UK is committed to this. Yes. The fact they got it in there, Russ, is encouraging. Russ is right to cry wolf because that's the way you make sure it doesn't get you, isn't it? But they did get it in there. It's the first time the EU have ever referenced data adequacy in a pre-trade agreement. We've been lobbying with our colleagues on the continent, because there are business trade associations like us across the whole of the 27, and they have been lobbying their governments, and we've been working in Brussels. We've got somebody in Brussels now. That's how significant these points that Russ is making are. And so, everybody needs to say this to every MP. Everybody up and down the country, all the clusters need to say, and everybody needs to go look at their business, because one of the surveys we did, both on mainland Europe and in the UK, People have never heard of Schrems 2. People don't understand what a standard contractual clause is. They've never had to use them. And so much of all the things you're talking about, Naomi, you go and talk to those media businesses, a lot of stuff is done in the UK for the whole of Europe. And they won't be able to do that kind of thing. Equally, fintechs won't be able to do that kind of thing. And professional services firms, all of the interesting stuff that's happening, all the robotics, all the rest of that kind of stuff, you won't be able to do that because you won't be able to move data. So it's a really big issue. The next one coming up, of course, is mobility. You know, you've already seen it with some areas where it's sending service engineers. It used to be get on a train, get on a plane, get the job done, do what you want. Now you have to have work permits. You have to have professional recognition. There's a lot of stuff that hasn't been done. So Brexit is not done, and it needs to be done. Having said that, I do think, given that we get the data adequacy, then there's been quite a lot of things to look for in that trade and cooperation agreement with the EU for digital. But we need to stay close to them. And one of the things we have given up is influence over their regulations. So there's new stuff about e-privacy coming out recently, and we're going to have to build some alliances. We're particularly going to have to get close to the new US administration, some of this stuff. And the good news there is there are very good connections between the UK and the US digital industry. It's not the same, but we need to make the most of those as well.
What are the early signs of Brexit in the tech sector in terms of what you're hearing from your members?
From our members, it so far so good, really, because all of the sort of things that are hitting the headlines at the moment that don't hit us the same way they do agriculture and so on and so forth. And of course, it's all hidden under this big pandemic problem. Nobody is sending anybody anywhere. Nobody is recruiting from anywhere. What I think we need to A, watch out for, but B, take advantage of is a version of what Russ and Naomi were talking about the ability to employ people up and down the UK in their locations. If travel and mobility and visas and all the rest of it are a problem, then what will happen is work will be done in the EU 27, and you don't have to think too hard and too long to sort of imagine all the things that brought so much of the industry here, the talent, connections, the vibrancy of our ecosystems could be recreated somewhere else. So we need to watch that. However, on the other side, of course, this does give us the chance to use the technology to open up to the world a lot more. And I know, Russ, Russ has, having conquered London and working with people all up and down the UK, is now got advocate groups around the world. And the opportunity for the UK to do these kind of things is very high.
And I think to build on that point, I mean, it's tough going. We have to expect more paperwork, more bureaucracy, more legal and compliance costs to make sure that we can operate these businesses on a business as usual basis. I often joke that British entrepreneurs are probably the most resilient entrepreneurs in the world because we've beaten the hell out of them over the past 5 years. We've had 4 or 5 years of Brexit to deal with and all of the uncertainty around that. We had an election in December of 2019 that started to give some clarity. And then 3 months later, we went into a global pandemic. And sadly, we lost a lot of businesses and small businesses in 2020. So those that have made it through, and some are, still hanging by a thread, and we have to do all that we can to help and support them. But those that have made it through these past few years are now able, I think, to be world conquerors. Let's help them to grow their businesses into the EU, to go to the US, to look at China and Singapore and Australia, New Zealand. And the beauty of the UK is that we have these amazing connections globally. I travel in the US a lot. I've been to China a lot, and they're big nations, and they tend to be very insular. And I think what we have to work on now in this post-Brexit or semi-post-Brexit environment is really building and nurturing those connections to all points around the world. You know, we've got a great foreign service. We've got organizations like the British Council. You know, I continue to be impressed with the caliber and quality of the entrepreneurs that are expanding internationally. I think that has to be a key part of the equation, whilst we in parallel think about how we do a better job leveling up across the UK. London can play a key role in this, but Manchester, Bristol, Edinburgh, Belfast all need to be an integral part of this equation. And I think if we get that right, coupled with what we were talking about earlier with respect to digital skills, employability, our universities, you can start to see a roadmap for the UK becoming this amazing tech nation. I often say to people, look, the two big behemoths in my lifetime are the US and China. We're not going to be at that level. We just don't have the big tech giants. We don't have the depths of data. But there is a critical role that the UK can play leading the rest of the world in terms of showing and demonstrating how you can be a vibrant tech nation in this global tech ecosystem.
Yeah, Naomi, Amy, I don't know how much time we've got left, but
a couple of minutes.
I just want to add two things to that, which is the first is think about the 2012 Olympics. Everybody had a home crowd there because the UK has so many people from different regional and geographic backgrounds. Let's exploit that, and that's a good reason to connect. You know, we're talking to people in Birmingham about this. What is Birmingham's key point? It's so many different cultures in Birmingham. Welcome the world. And then the second thing I would say is, don't in the regions, don't think about London. Think about the world. You know, don't try and become a mini London. Don't worry about London. London is going to be a great place. Think about where else could I go and connect and make a connection and go global. I say to people in this industry, if you don't go global, you'll go nowhere, because whatever you've got, however fantastic it is, if you haven't thought about how that goes global, somebody somewhere else will do it and you'll get subsumed and forgotten. And there's loads of examples of that. So go. Trade agreements that are there, they've all got a digital chapter in them. Use the communities that are here, and let's get on with it. And you know, we at Tech UK are very committed to working on that. So come and talk to us. We'll help. I know I'm already going to start work with you, Naomi. That's tomorrow. Okay.
Right. But Amy, just to really quickly add, there is lots of support out there. Obviously, Tech Nation have some amazing programs. And also, you know, local business growth hubs do, but also DIT as well. So there is support out there. You just need to go and find it and ask for it. If you don't ask, you don't get.
Absolutely. I'm definitely getting a sense that there are reasons to be optimistic about this truly digital future. So
reasons to be cheerful. Part 3.
Fantastic. Well, on that note, we have one question from the audience in the Q&A box, but I'm sure plenty of people have questions for you in the virtual networking. So this question, feel free to jump in, whoever would like to answer, or a combination. So are you concerned about a loss of emphasis for London on the European fintech stage after we hear news this morning that Amsterdam traded more shares than London?
Yes, I am. We cannot be complacent about this. Every European city out there is looking at what's gone on with Brexit in London in particular and trying to figure out how they can take advantage of it. Amsterdam certainly is one to watch. We're watching stuff in Paris and Berlin. I've got a call later today with China Daily to talk about Lithuania as the new European fintech hub, because we've seen a lot of UK fintech businesses go and set up there because they've made it very friendly for UK fintechs to do that. So we have to double down. We're going to have to work that much harder. We need to keep a watching eye on this. If there's any maybe one upside here is that I think when you look across Europe, there's not one destination. It's going to be diffused, you know, Amsterdam, Paris, Berlin, you know, Vilnius, Tallinn, you know, they're all making a play for this. So UK businesses, UK fintech businesses need to think about being in the EU if they want to obviously trade and operate. And there could be a drip of shifting more resources into the EU from UK fintechs, but we then need to double down. There are big initiatives underway, some driven by Treasury, some driven by organizations like Innovate Finance, City of London Corporation, to really focus on how we ensure that UK fintech continues to grow and expand. And I guess my point here is we cannot be complacent. We've done a great job here. Other cities, other countries are looking and saying, what can we do to take some of that and bring it into our home country?
Yeah, and I think that it's about upping our game as well. I mean, we've really got to be excellent now. And we've got to compare ourselves to the best. We must also stop the either or stuff that happens with Brexiters, which says, you don't have to worry about the EU because you've got India, you've got China, you've got Singapore, et cetera. That you need all of them. And one of the things that does concern us, I think, Russ, is that so many of the innovative businesses had EU founders that came to London.
Yeah.
And we've got to make sure there's still a good reason for them to have a business in the UK, whether that's London, Manchester, Edinburgh, or Belfast. And Belfast's a great example, by the way, of somebody taking cyber security, and they had a global approach to it, and they are now globally recognized as a cybersecurity hub around the world. So let's not lose the European connection, but let's have a look at Shanghai and Singapore and New York. How are we doing against them in fintech? And what's the secret sauce that we need to get going on? And government's got to move faster, by the way. I mean, the one thing that we would all say is it's so slow what they do. They ponder stuff, they do half measure. We've got to be faster, and we've got to be more consistent or long term and go for it. And we can do it. Look what we did with vaccines.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
So we have a second question from the audience. Isn't the focus on place increasingly irrelevant given recent experience?
Hey, there's a lot of stuff on that, if I jump in. And the answer is no, it's not irrelevant, because it's where people live and experience things. What you have to do is make them really interesting, exciting places to live. I was so interested in what Naomi said about this, because I used to go to Salford and sail many times before when I worked at IBM, Naomi, and it was a bit of a backwater, wasn't it? And then you could see how bringing in new business, I think it was one wine bar or something like that, but anyway, bringing in new businesses, obviously we've got the problem with hospitality and all the rest of it, but that will go. And making somewhere interesting. People say to me, what's the secret of a great tech city? And I always say bicycles and art and culture. You need some connectivity, I get that, but why do people want to come here? The Hudson Yards thing, it's not really about tech, it's about a living environment, interesting things, green spaces, parks that you don't really get in New York, and all those kind of things. So we got to up our game at that kind of thing, and then places will work. We've also got a lot of research now. Offices won't be the same, but it won't be nobody will go to an office. They'll go to an office in a different way and for different reasons, and they need the offices to be different. Russ, Naomi.
I just wanted really quickly to say, I know so many businesses that have downsized over the last year just because they realised that they don't need to have these big shiny offices now. And moving forward, it will, there's going to be the option that people can do flexible working. And Julian was just saying it. I think there's also going to be that people will, especially in the burbs, but even like in Salford, for example, there are so many different aspects of it, and it's like that in the other 10 boroughs of Manchester as well. We have all these different pockets. Leeds, again, brilliant example. Stuart Clark, who runs Leeds Digital Festivals, just did this a really amazing view of the ecosystem in Leeds via what looks like a tube map. And just has mapped it all out. And I do think, and you can see that actually, for the next years to come, we won't just be going into city centres.
Although I'm gonna defend city centres here, because I don't think they're going to go away, because particularly younger people, etc. Cooped up, sharing flat with 3 or 4 other people. They're desperate to get out. They're desperate to socialize and kind of work and play. Go hand in hand. And I do think, if I look at places like London, I look at the City of London, I've been part of the Lord Mayor's Culture and Commerce Task Force for the past few months. And a lot of the big offices, they're rethinking their office space. So do they need to have all the cubicles and all offices in those buildings? No, they don't. But I think we might see a next wave of innovation come through collaboration as many of these offices, many of these companies say, we're going to rethink our space, we're going to have open planning, we're going to open our doors more to more startups and scale-ups, to the creative industries, to the cultural sector, to actually use our facility. So I think the traditional office environment is steadily going to go away, accelerated by the pandemic. I think you're going to have a renaissance in terms of how cities think about this space. And that excites me because I think that's going to drive innovation and it's going to further underpin collaboration. Why is the UK so successful in tech? We do a really good job of collaborating with each other. We may beat ourselves up a lot, but when I talk to people in other markets around the world through global tech advocates, we're leading the pack in that regard. Let's not get complacent, but we have learned to be open and collaborative, and we're getting better at it too.
That point of collaboration has run throughout this conversation, which has been fantastic. And I think on that note, I think we should move to the virtual networking. Do each of you have a very final short snippet of a message you want to share before we go to virtual networking?
Right. So all I would like to say is, and again, this goes back to this collaboration, is, do you know what? It's a difficult time for everybody. Just be kind to each other. Look at how you can support each other. Again, just to sort of reiterate, and I'm not sorry, Russ, I'm like an advertising person here, but I would just like to say that's the beauty of global tech advocates. And, it's really about keep talking to each other and keep collaborating.
So I would sort of build on that and say one of the things that was happening before the pandemic was a big question about, is tech a good thing? Are we a good thing? And people called it a techlash, and lots of people think of these tech companies, all tech companies, they're either too rich or they're too powerful or they don't do the right thing. I think the pandemic has shown the importance of tech, the value of tech, from everything from genomics through vaccines to connecting people to be able to talk to grandma, et cetera, et cetera. And what I think we've got to go into 2021, we've got to keep that idea of purpose, inclusion, access, tech for all. And we should ask ourselves everything we do, because one of the dangers of the fact that you can move work anywhere around the world is if your only motivation for doing that is to cut the dollar that you pay your workforce, that's not a good thing. And so what we've got to do is we've got to think about the communities which are now bigger that we work in. We've got to bring a purpose to what we do, and we've got to bring value to the community, and we must include everybody in the digital future. That's every demographic, every gender, everybody.
Yeah, I fully support that point, and maybe just building on it, the message for me is, let's leave no one behind. Yeah. Let's bring everybody into this sector, into our tech ecosystem. We've seen the challenges that we have. We see so many people being displaced. We see the growth and demand in digital and tech. So there's no excuse to leave anybody behind, no matter what background, where they are, what age they are, whatever. That has got to be absolutely key for us as we move forward. And then the upside in doing that is, I know we will build a better, bigger, more sustainable tech ecosystem through better products, better services. We're going to create world-leading companies. If we do that, a sector that's basically driven by white men is not sustainable. And so let's bring everybody in.
Thank you. Russ, Naomi, Julian, it has been a pleasure having you this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take the time. And to our audience, as a reminder, you can now speak to Naomi, Russ and Julian during the virtual networking. Thanks again.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you. Bye.